Hello and welcome to Casting Nets Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Pastor Will Harley. I'm here with Pastor Dave Ruddat, and we are doing a pre-show recording today. Normally we would be live on Thursday, but we have some things that are going on. There is a pastor's get-together.
Oh, that was last week. This week I'm sending my kids off to college. 2 kids, 1 college, 1 minivan filled with a bunch of stuff. And we are driving out to New Ulm and dropping them off.
Yeah, there you go. So we can't get everything done all in the days that we normally do, but we're going to pre-record and then we'll release it hopefully on or close to our normal Thursday. We just got done with Beyond the Sermon, so just a little push for that. If you would like to tune in on Tuesdays for Beyond the Sermon, it's a good opportunity to ask questions about the sermon, more opportunities to ask questions about the sermon text and things. Why did we go in a certain direction that we did? So if you would like to join us on that, that would be great. But for today, we continue our I guess kind of a recent direction. We have been forcing ourselves to do some reading, forcing ourselves to maybe engage with some theological literature or literature in general. We started with kind of a look at some anthropology and taking a look at Low Anthropology, which was a book by David Zoll. And we moved our way into last week's show, which had to deal with narcotics and
psychedelics.
Psychedelics, sorry, not narcotics, psychedelics. That was really good, kind of bringing it around, what was the purpose and why are we doing this? To look, kind of follows that same idea. So when we talked about, we were kind of saying, their focus was almost like a worship. It was a sacramental use of those psychedelics, and they were kind of focusing their way towards that. So I thought, hey, what about a great book just came out from Michael Berg, who is the head of the theology department down at WLC, which is in Milwaukee, Wisconsin Lutheran College. And he is a very, I would say, well-versed pastor, the good Dr. Reverend. And he wrote a book called On Any Given Sunday, The Story of Christ in the Divine Service. So we kind of went, if we were going to follow our little line of thought, we went low anthropology, a need for something to come and work on us externally with David Zoll. We kind of went to the psychedelics, where we're still in the pursuit of this divine and the idea of a sacrament and something coming and acting on us. And now we've went to the divine service, where we get to see Christ act on us and Christ give his gifts. And so this is the book that I kind of chose. I did a disservice to Dave by forcing him to read the book in less time than he originally thought he had. And
I didn't have enough time to come up with a good dad joke. I just have the one where, what did the boy say to his fingers? I'm counting on you.
That's actually a pretty good one. Well, but also of time that I gave him to read this book, it's cloud on the book itself. And so I think there's some things there that we can talk about. Before we do that, why don't you give us our disclaimer, and then we have an opportunity to go into the show.
Sure, and you can answer the phone or not going to answer the phone. Yeah. The extended warranty will be out there, and your church will not have that extended warranty. Anyway, this is a show about 2 pastors having a conversation. You are joining in on 2 pastors just talking about stuff. And so you're joining a conversation, and as we are 2 pastors talking about stuff, we're just talking about stuff. And so we may not necessarily hold to what we say. We're just throwing stuff against the wall. We're just talking about things, bring up ideas. We're opening ourselves to actually having our mind changed as we talk to each other. Perhaps that's why we're having a conversation, so that we can learn from each other. So as we do so, if we say something that offends or sets you off or triggers you in some way, shape, or form, please reach out to us and at castingnetspod@gmail.com. You can reach out to Will at St. John and Maribel, or me at Emmanuel and Shirley. We are both there on Sunday mornings. You can talk to us then. You can talk to us during the week as well. if you like what we have to say in our conversations, you have our permission to share it and like it. And we recognize that when you like it, that it's not that you need to like us, that we're getting our affirmations from that, but that we actually recognize that you're trying to move this show along on the algorithms of YouTube and Facebook and whatnot, so that other people can hear more conversations. As we have this conversation, we are always lifting up the cross of Christ and holding ourselves to the Lutheran confessions and to, more importantly, to God's Word. Well, God's Word first, then the Lutheran confessions, which explain and give us God's Word in a way that we can inwardly digest as well. So, as I think I've got the disclaimer out and the preclaimer, the proclaimer, and now let's go on to the show.
So on any given Sunday, this is, I felt it was a great book. I'm just going to throw that out there. And I'm going to say it was a great book, not because it gave me anything that I didn't know as a pastor dealing with the divine service. What I liked about it is I was reading the book as one who maybe like I'm in worship every day, or but I tried to put myself into that realm of, why do we do worship the way that we do worship? What's the point? Where did it come from? How does it interact with us? What is with the why do we start things the way that we do? Why do we do, have an opening hymn? Is it just so that people can make it to church? All of these different reasons and things of why we do what we do and why we don't cut them from the service. That's kind of how I read this book, which I think then flavored how I approached it and why I think it is a very good book. If I was going to approach it as a pastor, I would definitely say it didn't give me anything new. It really didn't. These are things that I knew already.
Yeah, the book has it's two parts. First part of the book is you have a fictionalized story of a couple going to church, and so he does have a story of this is a guy who is Afghanistan veteran. He works at a prison, and he takes his wife who works at a law firm, and they're having some marital.
She's a social worker.
Yeah, social workers. Yeah, and they've got some marital issues, and things aren't going the greatest. But now here they're coming to church on Thursday of the Ascension, and so he actually walks you through a worship service on Ascension Day, explains a little bit about the worship, and then what might an individual go through their mind as they're in worship, and so that's the first part, and then the second part is where he actually goes through the elements of the worship service itself, and then explains why we do more that we do, because in the fictionalized part is only one or two aspects of it, but in the back of it, he is explaining more of why we do the things that we do.
And I will agree. I when I read that first part, I'm one of those people that when I read, I try to read out loud so that it slows me down and I kind of process what I'm reading. I got wrapped up in the story. I really did, because it's the kind of reaction that you would want any of your members to be going through. Just the thinking back to my interaction with Pastor, the wife in this scenario, Jenny. She was, she had come from a non-denominational background. She had come from a background where they didn't do liturgy. They didn't do, they didn't have the sacraments, at least anything close to what has been given in the Lutheran Church. The idea of baptism was always in question, even though in the story, her mother had, I'm going to get my child baptized. I know it's not what their church believed, but she's, and she comes into this marriage and, this is, their family is Lutheran. And so she becomes, they want to have this connection. And so she's walking through of what did she learn, this connection with the pastor. What did they learn about the sacraments? What did they learn about these gifts? What did they learn about what Jesus is doing, and how that kind of shadows, right, in many ways, her husband's thoughts as he's sitting in the service, and he's not thinking necessarily the same things that she's thinking. She's thinking along the lines of, especially in the very beginning, she's thinking along the lines of, I'm united with the greater church. That there's these elements that bring us together of the church worldwide, and that even though right here, right now, in this place, my family can't have fellowship with me because of the differences that we have, and rightfully so acknowledge those. They are still believers, right? They know their Lord and Savior, and that we will see them in the ultimate celebration at the end of the day. And John's thinking, I am a horrible guy. And I totally need this, and I can't believe that the Lord is blessing me like He is, and how they all come around, right? That was the part that I got caught up in that beginning. Is throughout the service they both come. I need this. This is for me, and this is my strength and my forgiveness and my new life. That well worth the read for any member, because it of what am I listening to? What am I responding to? Why am I going through this? I thought that was huge to me. That was, I got wrapped up in that story. I'm like, I want to know how it ends.
And we can have a difference of opinion on that, because I had a hard time with in every story, there's a suspension of belief that this is actually a real story, but but getting yourself into the story, I just had a difficult time with an Afghanistan veteran guy who works at a prison, is someone who is that knowledgeable on the arts and of paintings and this, and I saw this and that reminded me of this painting that I saw somewhere else. To me, that was kind of a jumping the shark, where I understand what he was trying to do, was trying to, as you carefully explained, of saying how in the worship service there is more than meets the eye, that there is lots for us to consider and think about as we go through the worship service. It isn't just going through the motion, but to give people a way to go beyond what's being said and reflect on why it's being said. Why are we talking about this? Where do we see the life of Christ in the worship service? So those things I appreciated, but I just the manner in which you did it, it really was hard for me to say, you're just throwing that in there because you like, this is true, but it doesn't fit the character that you've given to us.
And I understand what you're saying, but my brother's a vet. My dad was a postman, and my brother's a mechanic. And my brother talks about art when he was overseas. There's
an exception to every rule. I understand that.
I know.
And I'm not saying that all Afghanistan veterans don't look at the art. It's just for me as a character. Yeah. It was hard for me to put myself into that. So.
And I don't disagree. I'm not saying that for everybody, but coming from my family, my dad, after the war, he went and toured Europe, and he visited all the sites, and he saw all the things, and he referenced those when he was alive. Those were impactful things that he referenced and he made connections to. My brother goes out and takes pictures of the tranquil, and can talk about art, which is kind of interesting. He's, 6'3", 330 pounds, and he's very much a mechanic and very much a sailor in his speech. And then he can talk about those things. So to me, that was less of an impediment. I think the impediment that I sort of had was the depth of theological knowledge. And I'm going to admit that. I think, to these two on how much they remembered.
Yeah.
When it came to like the biblical knowledge and theological knowledge. And it's just, you don't see that every day. I think you see more people who are into the arts. I think you see more people who might know worldly the things that may be bringing them peace. But when you talk about the connections to the biblical things, I think sometimes there's a lot more disconnect. And I know it was to try to push the story on, and it was trying to wrap around these connections that are in the divine service with what's going on within the scriptures. But in that regard, I would agree with you. Maybe on a different part of it. You're more of the arts and as opposed to biblical. I would say it surprised me on the biblical aspect of that, but I still think it made a good story. And I think it should happen, and hopefully our prayer, what can happen in the divine service.
Yeah, that leads me to the greatest critique I have of it is that he's using the LCMS version of the hymnal and their liturgy. And so for our folks who are reading this, they'll be like, well, we don't have an introit, or we don't have this. Well, what is that? And to be honest, I mean, we have a book called The ABCs of Worship that we say, hey, here's a book on the worship and explains worship and on all that. But a lot of that is practices we don't have anymore, such as the Gesima Sundays before Lent. So for me to say, hey, read this book, this will explain the worship service for you, and they'll be like, what is this Gesima stuff? What is this introit stuff? Because we don't really do the introit even in our new Christian worship. So for that might be some confusion for our members, but if you're looking at it in just another resource, an easy read, and to look at the potential where people could go when it comes to what they could think about, what could go through their minds and hearts as they're going in the worship service, it could serve some value. I just have difficulty saying, here, read this book on. I don't have a good book in replacement of that, or read this instead. We've got plenty of Bible studies I've done on worship that essentially say the same thing of walking through the worship service. So that's my take, my opinion.
No, I just want to take a quick look at it, because when you buy the new hymnal for the Wells here, those parts are there, but they're not labeled as that way. When you have, because I've been using the builder, online builder, and Builder has all of those parts, and has it so when you print it out, it has the heading of those parts. Introit, they have all of the Kyrie eleison, all of those, the Pax Domini, all of those are listed. And I actually have been going through and I have to remove them.
I don't think the introit is listed though in the new blue hymnal.
It is in the builder.
In the builder, but not in the book.
Not in the book. No,
yeah.
And that's what I'm saying. So when you look at the book, you're like, I don't see any of those, but in the builder, you would. When you print them out.
And also, he has the lead up of the Confession of Sins, which is an adaptation of the TLH, which is not what we have in the new hymnal either. So it's just all these things where people are like, yeah, that sounds a little bit similar to what that we did in the TLH if you're an older member reading that, but it's not in our red hymnal, Christian Worship 93, and it's not in our Worship 21. So just some of those aspects of the book are going to throw members who are like, why don't we have this aspect in there? But
but in his defense,
part of the book. In his defense, it's for 1517, which is a predominantly LCMS website, which is producing materials for the LCMS Synod. So,
but he is Wells. He's a Wells pastor. So just to kind of be fair,
I said it was my opinion. It doesn't mean you have to adopt it.
I know. I grew up in the LCMS, so some of that was stuff I was used to. But I also think, the beautiful part about it is, and yeah, he did use that because in all actuality, the LCMS is bigger, so he has a much wider audience there, and they would resonate with that. But he does say in the beginning of his second part, he's like, this is a beautiful painting. This is something that has been done, and it's been giving comfort to the church for ages and ages. And he says, and the author of this has given every generation a brush to add one stroke, right? And I think that's where we get this. The divine service that we have, and it has been now, it used to be called the common service in the red hymnal, or the service of word and sacrament. They're both the same in those regards. They're different. You might say, well, they're different, but they're not. They still follow the same pattern. They still thoughts going through. And then now in the new hymnal, the divine service setting 1, 2, 3, all follow that same pattern. That's, I think, the point. The point is that even in the new hymnal, and I'm not in agreement, I actually like the Eucharistic prayer that he used in the book, as opposed to the one that is used in the new hymnal. The one that's used in the new hymnal, I don't like. I don't think it was worded very well. So I usually cut that out because I don't want to rewrite it, and I just cut it out. But those are things that are elements that are here. And the point of the divine service isn't that we are rote machines.
Yes, exactly. Right? Yeah.
The divine service is that we're taking from the scriptures and we're highlighting Christ. So, if you use a different psalm for an introit, or if you use a different way of a Kyrie eleison, of asking the Lord for mercy, and you want to do that through a reading of whatever, that's fine. If you there's other songs you can use for the Gloria, but I think it's beautiful that, what is the Gloria's purpose? To bring us back to the answer. We're crying for mercy. God gives us the answer. Here's Jesus. So you're brought back to Bethlehem. You're brought back to the birth of Christ. You're brought back to peace now on earth in the midst of your trouble. As you go through the service, you might have one or two readings of the scriptures. You may have a mini reading, right? You're doing a sermonette, but the readings are still there. You're highlighting Christ, right? There, the people still deserve to have sound doctrine and clear Christocentric preaching. They deserve to be given Christ and forgiveness that harkens back to the confessions and absolution that was in the beginning of the service and pushes us forward to the Lord's table. I think all of those things were important and I think are needed within the book. Now, you don't have to be exactly as one book prints it or something like that. But I just, there was such a love. You could tell the love that he has for the service. and I have grown to love it even more. I think we live in a generation, and the reason I thought this book is good is because we live in a generation where we want to throw it all away.
Yeah, but I'll say this. I did appreciate the idea that individuals will think that our liturgy is somehow some expression of white privilege. Like this is the way the Germans worship. So therefore, this is what you're trying to do. You're trying to push your culture on the cultures of the world. And he does a very good job of illustrating that this is the divine service has its roots all over the world, and it's used all over the world. Not the same way all over the world, but the pattern of going through, entering worship, and hearing praise, confession and absolution when there was no private confession and absolution, having that corporate, having a sermon, having the Lord's Supper, the various songs that we sing. The words of those songs might be sung in a different way, but the elements of the words, the content is all there. So I appreciated that. Again, is it the best book I would give to my members? I don't think I have a good book to give and say, here, read this to have a fuller appreciation of the liturgy. It's more of a Bible class. Let's go through these elements and talk about it, and we'll have a greater appreciation. Or as in Bible information class, we'll do the same thing. Well, let's go through the worship service. Right. Confirmation, same thing. Get out your hymnals. Let's just go through this, and I'll explain what this means and get your feedback from it so that we can appreciate what's going on here and see that what's going on here is God serving you, God coming and giving you his gifts in this worship service, not about us expressing any kind of our own preferences. And I did appreciate also your thought of the paintbrush of this is your service, that here, how can you enhance this, not throw it away because it's old or that or you're tired of it, but how can you enhance this so that Christ, which is the main focus of the worship service, continues to shine through.
Right. Well, and that's where and there isn't really a book out there that highlights I think in a very appropriate way for our laity of it. And a lot of that is done through Bible information, through confirmation, through Bible study. But for those people that don't, this is a good start. This really is. It's not a bad approach to say, here's the beauty of what we have and why we have it. But again, it comes back down to, when I do morning praise, when I do service of word and prayer, I add things to the service. Like I put the offering in where in service of word and prayer, the offering isn't there. I add, in the beginning of both morning praise and the service of word and prayer, I add a small opportunity for confession and absolution. Because this is part of that. You're coming to hear the words of forgiveness pronounced over you. And so I add those things, and it's because it comes back down to this, which I think is the point. We have a flow of a service that is to highlight the account of Christ for you. And it comes, you are here to receive because you are forgiven. You are here to receive because you are baptized. And you are a child of God. Flow from it. Everything that's going to come from this starts here. And then is I'm going to be reminded over and over and over again, the story of Christ, the account of Christ for me as a beauty. That's what when I read the book, because I have read a lot of worship. From Heaven Above to Earth I Come was another book that is, no, hold on. No, it's called Heavens on Earth. Sorry. Heavens on Earth is another book that attempted to do the same thing, that kind of describes the beauty of the historical liturgy and the beauty of the divine service. It was a huge book, and it was really dry. It was very good, but it was really dry. When we were in seminary, you can get the manuals, the Lutheran worship, that goes through and details everything, and great for going back and saying, I need some notes for a Bible study so that I can put it together and give my people maybe here's some facts about why this section, why not that section, so and so. But what this is just to me, it was a very approachable way for our people to jump in and just get their feet wet on it's 180 pages, 112 pages of actual reading. If you want to go through just the story, it's an easy way to get in and get your feet wet and say, hey, this is the privilege that I have. Talk about it. This is awesome. This is what I get. I thought it was a good book for that reason. So
right.
Anything else that we have on the book? Not a huge show, long show.
Not a huge show. We disagreed without being disagreeable.
So you would say not necessarily for your people.
No, I would say.
Dave would say, come to his Bible study, learn from him the beauty of worship. I would say, don't learn from me. Ask me questions, but learn from someone smarter than me. No, that's not true at all.
And I just the fact that it's not the liturgy that they are using. So if you're going to lead them to appreciate something, they're like, well, why don't we have this part, or what's going on? It might be more confusing than what you're intending. I do like the approach of having a story, of having a couple go through the worship service, and so I think that was a good approach that he did. Like I said, thought he jumped a shark with some of the character, trying to make those characters do too much, but that's my own opinion on that. And then also I did appreciate that after he got done with the story, he actually walked through what he talked about and did a little bit more, so that if people were just like, well, I'm kind of tired of the story, but just walk me through what happens on a Sunday, there you go.
Yeah.
But I guess I still wouldn't. It just, to me, it's not a resource I'd pass along. But it's again,
it's one of those things.
Go ahead.
Where no matter what you do when you are talking about worship and the service, you're going to have to explain something, because Common service is there's differences between the common service and the service of word and sacrament from the old red hymnal, and there's differences between the divine service and service of word and prayer, and then the morning praise service. You're going to have to take a step back and say, okay, yeah, what's the grand scheme? You're going to have to use something. You're going to have to,
yeah.
I mean,
it's like any good discipline. You have to have a reemphasize or reteach or not stop teaching the importance of what you're doing, why you're doing it. Children's devotions are good places to say, okay, kids, I'm going to do the sign of the cross. What is the sign of the cross about? Or we're going to sing the O Christ, Lamb of God. Why are we singing that? And having our kids walk through not just the liturgy, but the pictures that you have in worship. Let's take a field trip and look at this picture. Why do we have this picture on here? And explain. So that consistent explaining and teaching, which dads can do for their kids, which pastors can do for their congregations.
Which also goes a long way, because when you're congregating, and this is, I think, something we both agree with, when your congregation, and they will be in life, faced with new people coming out, being aware of what's the core framework. And looking for that framework and saying, this is okay, right? This is okay. The framework's here. And this is what preserves the church. The church has been preserved through the framework of, I am receiving Christ in every facet of the worship service, and it's leading me to receive him in his body and blood and bread and wine. And so this is okay. They changed the tune. I'm not a big fan of that. Or, oh man, they took out the these and thous. I'm not a huge fan of that. Okay, but is the framework there? And I think that makes things a lot easier to progress into and to introduce a new worship opportunity, and I think every church is going to have it. Every church is going to say, I prefer, and we do that more often, right? You're going to do that more often. But also to be able to be educated and encouraged to say, where's the framework? Can you recognize the framework? And maybe that's something that we can do, is take all these different services, right? And put them in front of people and say, okay, here's ours. Here's what we use in normal worship here at this place. Right? Here's these 2 sections. Here's these 3 sections from these 3 different, all in the same section of the framework, but they're all, and that's okay. And that's all right. Maybe that's a good way to go.
Well, anyway, join Pastor Will Harley this coming Sunday as he does just that at St. John Maribel.
No. We're doing Divine Service setting 1.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us. We are going ahead in time. We are time traveling, Will Harley and I, and right now I am, as you are watching this, I am traveling to New Ulm, and as you are watching this, Will Harley is in his study getting ready for confirmation and the Divine Service setting 1 and all those things. And so until then, we wish you well. And keep Christ as a focus of not just your worship life, but your home life and your devotional life, because he's got lots of stuff for you.